You're listening to Eat, Play, Sex with Dr. Kat, the place to up-level that sexy life of yours, with expert talk on sex, love, and nutrition.
How do you see the relationship of emotions impacting the body? Like, what are you noticing there?
There's people's, we'll call it stuck emotions for a generic term, but people's inability to process their emotions effectively shows up in different ways in different people. So for some people, they'll have a tightness in their chest and shoulders. For some people, they'll have a weak or an over tight pelvic floor. Some people have really flat feet or a difficulty engaging with the ground. And some people are just hypervigilant. So depending on where in their bodies, usually it's correlated with an old injury or a pattern that represents a protective mechanism that they've embodied. So for example, I worked with this woman who experienced trauma as a baby, like a one-day-old baby. And her relationship to training was really difficult. She would start training, and then at the 13-week mark, she would stop. So she would do Pilates, and she would make it to 13 weeks, and then she would stop. And she noticed in her calendar this number, 13 weeks, 13 weeks, 13 weeks. And a new, boxing, cycling, strength training. And she tried it, and it would always stop at 13 weeks. It was like her own little personal curse.
Whoa.
And I took her through, she was like, I feel like you can help me, Liz. You're talking more about the emotional thing. I intuitively feel like this is not an actual physical block. I feel like I have an emotional block to training, or she couldn't really identify what it was at first. So I took her through a series of sessions, and it was very clear to me that she had trouble with dissociation. So she was experiencing dissociative tendencies as she was working out. And she had trouble staying and remaining in her body. So it was a really beautiful practice to help her stay connected into her body. She had a lot of difficulty engaging her core. So naturally, it was really tough for us to stabilize in any sort of traditional strength training exercises. I asked her to be radically honest with me. And during one session, she said, Liz, I'm experiencing a lot of anger right now. And I was like, ooh, yes, like, great. Thank you. Okay, let's explore that. So I asked her a few questions and eventually decided it was appropriate for us to create a safe space for her to express that anger. And so she was doing lat pull downs and got so angry, right? And so I turned on some music, and I adopted a practice from Regina Thomasauer, Mama Gina, called swamping. And so I took her through a little mini swamping practice. I turned on like heavy death metal music, had her scream into a pillow, and allowed her just like one or two songs of just expressing that anger that she had, that she felt like it wanted to come out. And then afterwards, if I would have just left her after that, it would have felt very raw. So what I did was then I turned on a very sensual song and allowed her to come back into her body through sensuality, giving space for that anger to be expressed through sensuality, for herself to be expressed through sensuality. So at that point, the session, we weren't going to go back into lat pull downs for sure. And so we had a little integration afterwards. And when she came back for her next session, she explained to me, she was like, I felt like I touched on the place in me that I had hid from when I was a baby that made me believe that strength meant I had to protect myself against danger. And I was like, oh, wow. So can we get to the place now in our strength training practice and our strength training regimen that strength can mean you are the warrior behind the shield. It doesn't have to just mean the shield. So for her, strength meant I've got to protect myself. So anytime her body actually felt like it was getting stronger, she equated that, her body somatically equated that to, I have to protect myself at all costs, because for me, tensing up means I'm protecting myself. And so the interesting thing about the physiology of strength is that about the 12-week mark, you truly get stronger. Hypertrophy, you get stronger physiologically. The capacity of your musculoskeletal system to adapt and to have overcome and to be able to resist a harder load really fully integrates at about 12 weeks. So her body at 13 weeks recognized that she was getting stronger. And in her body, her response to that improvement in strength meant, this is terrifying. So we got to touch on the place where strength equated to terror, and her just even being able to see that strength equated to terror gave her the tools to be able to then overcome that. Now, when she touches on it in the future, she's able to say, oh, this is just what that is. And I can work to overcome that. And so our next session, her core was so strong. She was grounded into the ground. She was lifting at least 50% heavier than she was before, because she had that experience and that realization. It was profound. It was so gorgeous.
Oh my God. There's so much that you're saying in there that just my little trauma therapist mind over here and sex therapist mind over here is like, because if we even think about the emotions that you just mentioned there, the anger, the fear, the even sensual pleasure, the experience of pleasure is, how we relate as a culture to those three expressions is to inhibit it, to not allow it to live, keep it contained, right? As little kids, we're running around, we're going, we're like taking our pants off and waving in the air. We're like, pulling on people's ponytails, and our teacher is like, sit down, be quiet, behave, and our parents are like, don't touch that. Put your hands in your pockets. Put your pants on, and we're just kind of doing whatever feels right. We're just living in the moment. We feel something, we express it. We're scared, we cry. We get angry, we throw our block at our mom's head, and we... over time of this consistently being told, no, don't do that, sit still, causes us to contract in the body every time. No, contract, stop that, contract, sit still, contract. And so it's this constant contraction in our body and this constant message of don't express, and how that creates this rigidity in the body over time. And as a sex therapist, I know that when women oftentimes have trouble with orgasms, I talk to them about that emotional expression, because that tells me they may be clamping down in their body and they don't even know it.
Lovers, thank you again for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, hit subscribe and head over to eatplaysex.com to connect with me and grab my sexy guides. Because my goal here is to get you to eat, play, and sex better, so you can improve your sex life, which will improve every aspect of your life. Until next time, keep it sexy.